Hello everyone. How is everyone doing? Welcome aboard. I'm just going to wait for a few moments so that the Facebook Live kicks in and everyone gets notified and has some time to jump on board and join in. So I'm just going to wait. This always seems to take some time. Hello, welcome everyone. Good to see a few people joining in. Now, don't forget to say hi as we move along so that I can say hello back to you. I'm just going to wait a little bit longer. I'm just putting my stuff together that I have to talk about today. Hopefully you've all had a nice Sunday so far. As you can probably see behind me, it's a bit of a gloomy day here in Sydney, and I believe it's even drizzling outside, so which is good. We need some rain, and hopefully that does happen. So welcome everyone. This is Nim Golkar, and you are watching the next episode of my talk show, Sunday Chats with Nim. So this is my talk show where every week, every Sunday at 4 p.m. Sydney time or 11:30 a.m. India time, I bring you a topic that'll help you get ahead both personally and professionally. So today's topic is dealing with negative people. In the last episode, we had discussed how to deal with negative thoughts and how to overcome negative thoughts. So I thought it would be interesting to follow up last week's session with today's topic, and that is dealing with negative people. So if you've joined in, friends, don't forget to say hello to me so I can say hi back to you. And also let me know if the audio is okay and if you can hear me clearly. Because there's not much point if I continue talking and you cannot hear me. So if you can hear me, can you just do a thumbs up or let me know that all is well with the audio? Okay, so dealing with negative people. Now, most of us at different points in our lives have come across different kinds of negative people. These negative people might be in our friend circle, they might be our acquaintances, they might be colleagues, they might be neighbors, they might be our bosses whom we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Hi Sneha, thanks for letting me know you can hear me. That's good, that's a relief. Welcome aboard and thanks for joining in. So we've all met different kinds of negative people in our lives. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the first half of today's program talking about and exploring strategies to deal with negative people when they happen to be either our friends, acquaintances, colleagues, bosses, etc. But the second half of today's session, I'm going to talk about what to do and how to behave when these toxic people or these negative, difficult people happen to be either in our own family or happen to be in our immediate network, in our inner circle. Because that can make things pretty awkward, that can make things pretty uncomfortable for us. Because there are some relationships that we simply cannot turn our backs on and walk away from. So in the second half of today's session, we're going to talk about strategies we can implement when we're dealing with toxic people who happen to be in our immediate network, in our inner circle. But we're going to start with general strategies on how to approach or how to deal with difficult people in general on a day-to-day basis. Now, while I'm still waiting for others to come on board, I'm going to share with you two really interesting quotes that I happened to read, which I thought were apt for today's session. So the first quote goes a bit like this: stay away from negative people because they have a problem for every solution. Now, you might have found that there are some people whom you try to help. You go out of your way to help them. You go out of your way to think of strategies that can make life easier for them. But these people stubbornly refuse to take those suggestions, and they find a problem with everything that you suggest to them. These are the kinds of people who always find a problem with every solution that is ever offered. And it becomes a little difficult to deal with these kinds of people, because really all they want to do is complain. And the other quote I want to share with you, which was given by Jim Rohn, and he said, you become the average of the 5 people you spend most time with. And that is so true. I have found that to be incredibly true in my own personal journey. We become, after all, the company we keep, and so it is very, very important to surround yourself with the right people. So folks, if you are watching this today and you're on board, please say hello to me. Do say hi, and also let me know where you're listening in from. So like I always say, let me know hi from Sydney, hello from Mumbai, or wherever else in the world you're listening in from, because it makes us all feel a lot closer and more connected with each other. So for those of you who have only just come on board, the topic for today is dealing with negative people. So let's begin with, what are the different kinds of negative people that we can come across in our day-to-day lives? As you know, negative people come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So I'm going to explore some of the most common types that you might bump into. The first kind of negative person that you may find is someone who is overly pessimistic, who has a terribly gloomy outlook on life. Someone who always sees the glass as half empty instead of half full. And this is the kind of person who always sees faults in others. I'm sure some of you might have met this kind of person at some point in your lives. I certainly have. The second kind of negative person that might come your way is someone who is always going through life, always suspicious of everyone and everything they come across. They always go around believing that every single person who meets them is out to take advantage of them, right? And that is quite a gloomy way to live. The third kind of negative person or negative people that you might encounter are the people who are not only afraid to dream big themselves, but who also drag you down and prevent you from dreaming big. The trouble with this is that if you hang out with people like this, who are afraid to say yes to new opportunities, who are afraid to take on new challenges, then the danger is that you might also develop a similar belief system, and you might also become terrified every time you have to step outside your comfort zone and do something new. Because as we all know, to become successful, to achieve our goals, it is very, very important to take on new things. It is very important to become comfortable with the idea of becoming uncomfortable. But if you're always surrounded by people who are afraid of failure, afraid of ridicule, afraid of what people might say, then I'm afraid you too will develop a similar kind of outlook on life. And that's why it's very important to surround yourself with people who not only dream big, but who also follow that up with little action steps, because they will encourage you also to demand the best from yourselves. Now, if you have met different kinds of negative people that I have not already covered, please let me know in your comments, because I'm sure there are multiple kinds of negative people with multiple kinds of negative approaches to life. So feel free to write in your comments your views, some of your experiences, or what you may have seen of these kinds of difficult people that seem to be all around. And then the other kind of negative person that you might meet is someone who thrives on spreading gossip, who poisons your mind against the people around you so that you start seeing everyone else around you in a less than favorable light. Hi Leela, how are you? Thank you for joining in. Don't forget to say, let me know guys where you're joining in from, which city. I always love to know that about my viewers. So these are some of the kinds of negative people, some of the most common kinds of negative people that you might come across. And of course, like I just asked, if you've met any other kinds of negative people, please put that in your comments. I would be interested in reading about that as well. Now, let's talk about effects of having these negative people around you. Now, negativity can be pretty contagious, right? Without realizing it, it is very easy to get sucked into a negative spiral if that's the only kind of thinking and the only kind of mindset that we become exposed to, right? If you are surrounded by habitually negative people, then they probably will leave you feeling emotionally exhausted for a large portion of your time. I'm going to give you an example about someone I was friends with a long time ago. So this person had everything going for her. She had a great family, she had a great support system, she had a great job, she had some fantastic holidays every year. And yet, despite having so many blessings, whenever I spoke to her either over the phone or I spoke to her face to face, all she ever did was talk about how life was just so unfair. Even when I tried to point out to her her many blessings, even though I tried to point out to her that there was so much misery and suffering outside in the world and there was so much to be thankful for, she still insisted in finding something wrong in every aspect of her life. And I found that when we deal with people like that who continuously complain, it is emotionally exhausting, it can drag you down, and it is not good for your own emotional health. And that's a huge problem. Hi Varsha, I'm glad you're enjoying. Thank you so much for joining in. It can drag you down. Now, how did I deal with that? I did try explaining to her over the months and over the years that that kind of negative thinking was not only impacting our friendship, but also it was probably impacting her own emotional well-being, and that kind of thinking wasn't good for her in the long run. But no matter how much I tried to explain to her that it's important to focus on the positive, she just would not get that. And then it was time for me to ask myself and to assess whether I really need these kinds of friendships in my life which drag me down. So of course, all of us reach a point at some time where we have to assess our friendships and ask ourselves whether we need people who are constantly dragging us down. Now, let me say here that as human beings, it is very normal, it is very natural for all of us to complain from time to time. It is very normal and very natural for us to vent because that is needed, right, for emotional health. In this episode, though, the people I'm referring to are the habitual, chronic, constant complainers who never have anything good to say about anything in life. So those are the kinds of people we're talking about today, and we're going to explore some strategies, some tips on how to handle them. Okay, so let's continue. So some of the strategies that I can think of and that I've personally used myself is firstly, limit the amount of time you spend with these toxic people. You don't have to spend hours and hours with these people who drag you down. Try and meet them in short bursts of time so that their company does not leave you feeling completely demotivated. Okay, so the first strategy is try to limit or minimize the amount of time you spend with the chronic complainers, the people who have nothing positive to say about anything in life. The next strategy is try changing the topic. Now, I know some of you might be thinking this is easier said than done, but really, if you try, it's not too hard, right? Now, there are some kinds of people who have got into a lifelong habit of never being happy about anything. Okay, these are the people who always want to complain about something or the other. Even if you try to point out the positive aspects of their lives, they will still come back to complaining, right? So what I might suggest is that with these kinds of people, try and divert their attention to the positive aspect of things. This might not be always possible. Some people will take the hint, but some others won't. But it's always worth trying. Okay? The third strategy is to pick your battles. As they say, it is not compulsory for us to accept every single invitation to every single argument that comes our way. Sometimes it is wise to simply walk away, particularly if the consequences of walking away are not too severe. Varsha is asking, how do you manage whining colleagues? Yes, that is a very, very common problem, something most of us have faced at different points in our careers. I know I certainly have. Like I said, one strategy could be, of course, to limit how much time you spend with them. The second strategy might be to hear them out for a little bit, but then to divert their attention to the other side of the coin, perhaps letting them know that there are always two ways or more than one way to look at the same situation. If we keep listening, Varsha, to negative people, they almost start believing that it is okay for them to be like that. It's okay for them to go through life being negative. Instead, I might suggest nipping it in the bud and letting them know that this kind of bleak outlook on life, when they're constantly complaining, is doing no good to any of you, and perhaps it's time to look at things from a different perspective, from a more positive perspective. So let them be accountable for their behaviors. Let them know in a subtle, polite way that this kind of negativity is not something you're going to stand for, and set up some healthy boundaries around you so that people know that they can't take advantage of your good nature just because you happen to listen to them every now and then. All right. So yeah, like I said before, pick your battles. You don't always have to get into arguments with people. It's okay to walk away from certain battles. Like I said earlier, particularly if the consequences of walking away are not too serious. Right? Because there are some kinds of people, and you've probably all met them. There are these people who start arguments just for the sake of it. They start arguments because it gives them something to do. They start arguments because they have nothing better to do. And we fall into the trap, and then it's us who are left with a headache. It's us who are left with a terrible mood, and everything else gets ruined. So watch out for these traps, because you'll always find people wherever you go who begin arguments and then just sit back and watch the fun. So it's best not to play into their hands and give them what they're looking for. It's best to walk away. Hi Vinita, how are you doing? Thank you for joining in. And the other strategy, which I already explored a little while ago, was to not give these negative people any opportunity to think that what they are doing is normal, because it's not. If you have a chronic complainer who's going through life complaining about everything, there's nothing normal about that. It is an extremely unhealthy habit. So it's always good to let them know that you're not going to stand for that kind of behavior, and that you're not someone who's going to get sucked into negativity. All right. Hi, Vandana. Vandana from Perth. Good to see you, Vandana. Also, friends, I find that there are some negative people who are negative because deep down they're extremely insecure. These are people who feel undervalued, who feel unloved, who feel unimportant, who feel as though no one really wants to listen to what they have to say. And when I find myself with these kinds of people, one strategy that has helped is by encouraging them to focus on their strengths, to discover their strengths and then to focus on them, and to let them know of the ways in which they can add positive value to the lives of the people around them. Because once they realize that they have a positive part to play in the lives of everyone else around them, these people become less bitter, they become less negative, and it has a positive outcome for everyone, both yourself as well as them. Okay. So these are some of the strategies for dealing with people, with negative people, when they happen to be either in your friend circle or when they happen to be at your workplace. Now, like I said, the second half of today's program was going to be about what do you do when the toxic people or the difficult people who drag you down happen to be in your family or happen to be in your immediate circle. Because of course, if it's someone you're closely related to, then it's not always possible to simply walk away from that person. Easier said than done, isn't it? I know there are countless articles that are written about how to handle difficult people when they're your friends or their colleagues. But I myself have written articles on that topic, but not much has been written about what to do when the difficult people are either in your family or are in your immediate circle, because it's not possible to walk away from certain people because of the kind of relationship you share with them. So how then do you handle these people? Because of course it's going to require a slightly different skill set to deal with them. The first thing I want you to remember is, and to recognize, is that you cannot change them. Okay, unless someone wants to change, no one else can change them. Sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that we're going to be the first person to bring about a positive transformation in the life of so-and-so, only to find yourself bitterly disappointed. Because I've found that unless someone really wants to change, they won't, no matter how hard you try. As the old proverb goes, you can take a horse to the water, but you cannot make it drink it, right? So what is in your control, though, is how you respond to circumstances. The circumstances themselves may not be within your control, but what you have the power to change is how you respond to what happens to you, how you react to what people do to you or say to you. That is still within your control, right? The next thing when you're dealing with toxic people, either in your family or your immediate network is to figure out what are those topics that always lead to maximum drama. And whenever it's possible, try and avoid those topics, right? But then you might find that no matter how much you try to stay away from certain sensitive topics, these people always find their way back to that sensitive issue. Like I said earlier, it's often a trap. Recognize the trap and sidestep it, right? Because there are some people who will begin arguments, like I said earlier, just for the sake of it, because it gives them something to do. So don't give them the pleasure of falling into that trap. The next strategy for handling these people is to know your emotional triggers. Know what exactly it is that makes you angry, that makes you upset, that makes you anxious, or that makes you sad. Because chances are the troublemakers around you have figured out your weak points well before you figured it out for yourself. Let's give you an example. Let's say that you are a stay-at-home mom and you find that every time your spouse or your in-laws bring up the topic of why you haven't gone back to work yet, every time they bring up that topic, you just lose it, right? So that's your emotional trigger, and that's something to watch out for. Or let's say that every time someone in your family brings up your weight problem, right? Every time someone talks about your weight or how you must start going to the gym, maybe every time that topic comes up, that's when you become overly anxious. That's when you feel completely unworthy. Recognize that, because once you know your emotional triggers, once you know what sets you off onto a bad mood, then it becomes a little bit easier to remain in control. Okay, so let me read this question. Leela, how do you respond to people who always find a way to demean you? Okay. Remember this famous quote by Eleanor Roosevelt, and she had said something along the lines of, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Unless you give someone permission to make you feel less worthy, no one is going to make you feel that. So I've always believed that you must go through life believing that you are worthy, believing that all the good things will come to you. And there will always be people who have something negative to say, no matter what you do. You may have found, Leela, that sometimes we do everything to the best of our capacity, and yet there is always someone, at least one or two people, who still have something to criticize. So you're never going to find everyone on board with whatever you do. There will always be people who put you down, but remember that unless you give them permission to get away with that kind of behavior, they won't be able to get away with. So the first step to building self-confidence is to have self-faith, and that only comes with practice, repeated practice, and positive affirmations every single morning that you are worth it. So we need to look in the mirror and tell ourselves that, you know, we love ourselves and we are worthy of love and acceptance. All right, so to come back to the previous point, recognize your personal triggers, because these are traps other people might set for you. And once you know what are some of the things that make you upset, you're not going to be able to overcome some of the snide remarks that come your way from the toxic people around you. When you have difficult people in your family or in your inner circle, it's always very, very important to have your own personal cheerleaders squad. What I mean by that is always try and have at least one or two people, no matter where they are in this big wide world, always try and have one or two people whom you can call at any time of the night or day, people who can make you start believing in yourself again. So always have your personal cheerleader squad ready, right? I think they're called the 2 a.m. friends. These are friends whom you can call anytime and know that they will turn up on your doorstep to help you out. So if you have more than one such friend, you are truly blessed. Another thing that I would highly encourage you to do is to discover that one skill that you are good at, and then spend all your time and possibly the rest of your life mastering that skill. Now you might wonder why that is so important. Because once we realize that we truly have the capacity and the ability to stand on our own 2 feet and survive, if life ever brings you to that juncture, then it is much easier to forgive the difficult people around you who are making life impossible. So always try and find something that you're good at and hone that until you are on your way to mastering it. Many people who might be watching might not know what that one skill is that they're good at. So the best way to do this is to actually start saying yes to new opportunities, to new challenges that come your way. Like the old quote goes, you are allowed to be brave and afraid at the same time. Just because something terrifies you, just because it's something you've never done before, don't let that stop you from trying on new things, because it's only through trial and error, it's only through the process of elimination that you're going to find out that one skill that you are naturally good at. And then you can spend all your time becoming a master at it. It's the best way to build self-esteem and self-confidence. So that to answer Leela's earlier question, when people try and demean you, one of the best ways to combat that is to know at the bottom of your heart that you are terrific at something particular and that you're so good at it that everyone around you has to take you seriously, right? As they say about the comfort zone, if you want something you've never had before, you must do something you've never done before. Another habit that you may find helpful, and a lot of people whom I've coached have found helpful, and I've talked about this in other episodes, is to start writing a gratitude journal. I can't stress this habit enough. It is tremendously empowering. So what it is get yourself a little journal, a little diary, and every night just before you go to bed, write a minimum of 3 things that happened during the day for which you are truly, truly grateful. Now, when you get into this habit, what happens is that you go through your day proactively looking for experiences and incidents and interactions that will later become journal entries later at night when you get into bed and write your gratitude journal. So this keeps you focused throughout the 24 hours each day on positivity, right? And the last strategy I want to share today is I want you to remember, friends, that your brain takes instructions only from you. It doesn't take instructions from your spouse, your in-laws, your colleagues, or your boss. It listens only to you, right? So no matter what the people around you say to you throughout the day, no matter the demeaning things people say, no matter the insulting stuff that comes your way, no matter what happens, make sure that you write your own script before you hand it in to your subconscious. So I'm going to read to you a little quote that Gautam Buddha had said, which is so beautiful and so profound. And it goes like this: we are shaped by our thoughts. We become what we think. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. This was a quote by Buddha, and I think it is so tremendously profound, so deep. So friends, that's it for today. Of course, this is by no means a be-all and end-all guide on dealing with negative people. I've just tried to share some strategies and some tips which will hopefully make things a little bit easier when you're dealing with all kinds of difficult people around you, because of course, as we all know, there's no escaping negative people. They're all around. So I'm going to end with another quote, and that is, you cannot hang out with negative people and expect to live a positive life. I'm going to repeat that. You cannot hang out with negative people and expect to live a positive life. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's session. If you've enjoyed, I'm going to assume that some of your family and friends might benefit from it too. So please do share this video with anyone and everyone who you think might enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday, same time, with yet another topic to help you get ahead, both personally and professionally. Have a fantastic, fantastic week ahead, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.